Thanks so much for everybody joining us. I gotta be honest with you, it's very weird talking to my screen. Usually when I do these presentations, I'm in front of a group of people, so I apologize if it comes across kind of canned and weird because I like to engage in the audience. So work with me here. So the first thing, I kind of want to just introduce myself. And this is my daughter, by the way. She is fierce, just like her photo. But I want to first kind of give you my background so you understand why I'm talking about this subject. I've been in the field for about 18 years. I worked first at the Richmond SPCA for 7 years. I was at the Charlottesville Albemarle SPCA in Charlottesville for 2 years. And then I was the executive director of Lynchburg Humane Society for 9 years. And I just left there to come to Best Friends in September. So in all three organizations, we had a managed intake. First in Richmond, we started it back in around 2002. We went from an open admissions facility to a limited admissions because we were a private organization with no contract from the city to take in all owners or strays, yet we were. And so we shifted our focus to being more of a resource for the community. And so a lot of these forms and information I'm giving you today started back in Richmond. In Lynchburg, when I came on board in 2009, we implemented the managed intake program within a few months of me starting in July. So those two areas are going to be my frame of reference when I'm talking about this program. And hopefully you'll have some really good questions at the end in case I miss anything. So that's kind of who I am. So the outline for the class, we're going to first start with the way I look at managed intake. It's two components. We're not talking about stray animals in general. We're not talking about managing the intake of strays too much. Mainly community cats would fall into that area. But the majority of this class is going to be talking about owner surrenders, how to set up a program. I'm hoping that you can walk away from this class with some nuts and bolts to be able to start something in your own community, or at least have some framework for you to reach out to other organizations that are already doing this type of work to kind of better learn how to get things started. So let's start with saying what owner surrenders. So it's important for you to know if you are required to take in owner surrenders in your state or in your local town or community. In the state of Virginia, which is where my history is, we are not required to take in owner surrenders at all. We're only required to take in dogs running at large. We don't even have to take in cats. We do, obviously, most communities and most shelters in the state that are public shelters take in cats and owner surrenders. But it's good to know this because a lot of the arguments around this program was you have to take in these animals. You're required to take in owner surrenders. When in actuality, we were never required to do anything other than dogs running at large. And it was a tool for us to be able to communicate to the public that we were doing something above and beyond what was required of us. And so that helped kind of build those types of communications. Also in North Carolina, they are not required to take in owner surrenders in case any of you are from that state. However, there are local ordinances and laws that sometimes require those types of things. So just know your laws and know what you're required to do legally. So as I go through this presentation, one of the things I talk a lot about is whether or not you are creating your policies on fact or fiction, or are you coming from a place of fear, or are you coming from a place of trust? So I think it's important that we all evaluate all of our policies around our managed intake, our adoptions, everything, because I think it's important to recognize that sometimes we create policies based on a few jerks rather than on the better majority that are out there. More people are doing the right thing than are doing the wrong thing. And I think sometimes we set policies up based on our fear rather than on trusting the majority of the people. And hopefully I'm not going too fast. It's tough, like I said, talking to my screen. Anyway, so core philosophy. So one of the very core philosophies of this type of program is to believe that most people will do the right thing if they have the resources, they understand what they're doing and the why they're doing it. You have to come from a place of trusting people, otherwise the managed intake program will not succeed too well. Also, owners have the greatest responsibility for caring for pets in their community. It is not the responsibility for caring for all the pets in our community from the shelter's perspective or animal control or government. It has to fall onto the owners, and we have to incorporate them in our plan. Because honestly, most people are good and most people will do the right thing. So let's jump in. What are the fears? Because we hear them all the time. So hopefully if I miss any, you can tell me at the end if I've missed them. So animals will be hurt, dumped, if turned away. Owners won't wait. Animals will end up at other shelters in the area. Conflict at the intake desk or on the phone. Nobody likes conflict, right? And then ultimately there'll be public outrage. If you're a government shelter, that's the #1 fear I hear a lot of, besides the animals being hurt or dumped, is that the community will be upset and then they'll contact local government officials and create havoc and problems. I'm going to go over all of these fears through the presentation. I'm going to talk briefly about the public outrage because I think it's important to note that in both cases, both first in Richmond and then finally in 2009 when we started our intake diversion in Lynchburg, it wasn't the public that was upset. And if you were in the audience, I would ask you all who you thought was most upset. It was not the community at large. When we started educating the community on what we were doing and why we were doing it, they understood it and they wanted the best outcome for the pets. It was the other rescue organizations, the other public shelters and other counties around us that were very upset with us because of the fears that they had. So I think it's interesting that the public really understood it, but the other rescue organizations did not. And if I don't cover any of the fears as I go through, please ask them at the end. But I think I'll cover all of those to kind of put everyone's mind at rest. So hopefully if you're listening to this webinar, you are already considering a managed intake program. So the benefits are it allows staff to prepare for incoming animals. If you know how many animals are coming in that day, you can have vaccines ready, you can have your staffing ready, you can have a space that they're going in and you have better plans for those animals coming in. It lets owners see you as a resource. It helps to gain some ground there and it stops them from seeing you as a dumping ground. I think historically we've taught owners how to treat us. And I think it's important that instead of being the place that enables bad behavior, that we are the place that they could go to for help. It provides a service for owners. You know, if I needed to surrender my pet, I would want to take it someplace where I knew that my pet was safe and that the other pets in the centers are safe as well. And it gives more space, time, resources for emergency situations or at-risk animals. A managed intake is never about turning away those animals or making people wait with animals that have emergency situations that cannot wait. And I'll go through that later on when I show some statistics for our appointment system in Lynchburg. But at no point are we to ask anybody to wait if they have an animal that's at risk or they themselves are at risk and they have no place for it. It engages the community to be a part of the solution. It involves them in the problems that you're facing and it helps to educate them on what's going on. And ultimately, it does save lives. So our owner surrender and assistance program, what is it? So the first and foremost thing is the staffing and the setup. So in Richmond, when we went through the change, we went from open admissions to limited admissions with this appointment system. We were nervous. We spent a few months, we did our research on some of the basic behaviors that we're going to hear about, like litter box, house breaking problems, jumpy mouthy, some of the basic behavior problems that we are going to end up with on the phone. So we were educated in them. We did a lot of role playing. We did a lot of conflict resolution. We trained our staff. And then when it came to actually implementing the exact date that we started, we had management staff hovering around waiting for the big conflict to happen at the front desk or the phone call that comes in that someone's very upset with us. And it never happened. And it's because we set it up properly. So the first and foremost thing we looked at is we looked at the people who are manning the desk, and we looked at the people who are having those conversations. You want to have people who like people, caring individuals, problem solvers, and this is a big one. You should be empowering those people on the phone, helping owners to solve those problems for them, but also to be able to make the decision that this particular situation can't wait and that animal needs to come in right away. I've often said, and I think everybody should say it, that at no point should you ever put an animal at risk. If you feel like you're making a decision to be the best thing for that pet, then you will never get in trouble for that. Always look to the best interest of the pet. Be kind and generous, be good listeners, and ultimately be non-judgmental, but be firm. You can't have someone who's making exceptions every single moment of the day. You have to sometimes push against owners to make them really see and understand and almost engage them. So if you're giving in every time, then you're really not having much of a successful program. So you have to be all these things, but you also have to be firm. And the joke is that nobody would let me answer the phone for a while because I was the first one to make exceptions. So I get it. You want to be helpful, but you also have to make sure that you're following the program. So then we also set them up with some basic customer service skills. We wanted to make sure everyone smiled, and not just in person, but also on the phone. You can smile on the phone and hear the difference. Maintain that non-judgmental platform. The minute the people begin to feel like you're judging their situation or you're not being empathetic, then you lose them a little bit. They start to become defensive and they're going to be less likely to work with you. You want to listen, and then you want to listen some more. And it's about listening to the problem and understanding what the issues are, and not being someone who is trying to educate right off the bat. You need to listen. Because sometimes we jump over to communicating rather than listening, and sometimes we miss some of the nuances. My favorite thing is empathy. Every single person that calls should have somebody saying how sorry they are about their situation. I have been on the phone a number of times with a number of cat people who have cats that are peeing outside the litter box. And I can't tell you how many cats that I've owned personally that have peed outside the litter box when I actually have never owned but one cat in my life. And it wasn't a litter box problem, but I empathized with them. I'm so sorry, Miss Smith. I can understand how frustrating it is that your cat is peeing in the clean laundry. I can't tell you, my cat does the same thing, and it is so frustrating. You have to empathize with these people, with their situation, because they won't care what you have to say until they feel like you care about what their situation is and that they truly know that you've heard them. And then you want to ask questions. You want to open-ended questions and then engage them with some conversation, because you've already now hopefully established some relationship there. Tools for easier communication is reflective listening and mirroring. We went through exercises of this, and I got to tell you, this is my favorite thing to do on day-to-day life with my husband, with my family, with my kids, with my coworkers, with my staff and clients. Is I like to mirror back what I'm hearing, A, to make sure that I understood what the problem is, and B, to make sure they understood that I am listening to what they're saying. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Open-ended questions to engage them in more conversations. And then I like to give choices. I can't do this, but I can give you a choice. You can either do this, we could help you rehome your pet, or I can bring your pet in for an appointment in about 3 weeks. Which choice would you like to see? And then know how to handle conflict. The most important thing you can do for your staff is that when things start to get heated, that they understand where to go next. We used to give them written down phrases at the front desk to say to people when it hit a point where they didn't feel like they were communicating well. One of them was, for instance, "I'm really sorry, I seem to have upset you, and that wasn't my intention. I don't know if I'm the right person to help you with this situation any longer. Why don't I find another employee, or even better, my supervisor, and let them talk to you, and perhaps they can help you, because I feel like I've upset you and it's not what I wanted to see happen." So now that you got staffing, you got some training done, you want to start to engage the community when they start to call in. The first and foremost thing to do is listen to problems. When someone calls in and you have an appointment system or a managed intake system, first thing you say to them should be nothing. You should be listening to them and gaining information and empathizing to the situation. You shouldn't jump right in with, well, we have an appointment system, so let me get this information, because that puts up a barrier right there. So we created these surrender profile consultation sheets. And this is something we started in Richmond, and we used it in Charlottesville, and we used it in Lynchburg. And all this are questions to start conversations so that our front desk staff were all on the same page. Sometimes they don't use them verbatim. Sometimes they ask other questions and then they could write things on the back. But we just wanted to make sure going forward that we at least had something for them to start with. This is not our owner surrender form. This is straight the initial conversations with people when they walked in the door or when they called us on the phone. And so obviously we want to get some of the basic information and how long they've owned the pet, where did they get the pet, because obviously sometimes if they got the pet from another rescue organization or a breeder or a pet store, we can then start going down a different path with them with finding a different solution. But we want to learn more about their situation, explain why you feel like you can't keep your pet. So let them open up and talk to you about some of the problems. You know, for instance, if they say the dog is aggressive, then what does that mean? You may then branch off into another type of question to have them explain to them what the actual behavior is that they're experiencing. And then you might talk to them about solutions and solving certain problems. Are you able to work with this problem if they were given the resources? Have they hit the point where they just don't even want to work with the problem anymore? And then we ask at the bottom here, describe what you've tried to do to find your pet a home. So if they've already done a slew of things to help find and rehome their own pet, then we know kind of where to start. If they've not tried a single thing, then we can give them more resources. Describe where your animal is living at your home. We put this in there because of the fear. So the fear was that we were making people wait with pets that were living in unhealthy conditions or in backyards chained up, or you know, situations like that. So we put this on the sheet, and we've kept it on the sheet because it does two things. One, it helps us find out if we need to bring that animal in quicker because of the living conditions, but also it lets us know if some of the behavior problems might be from where the animal is living in the home. How does it react to strangers? We just kind of want to know going in as it comes into a new environment, how it's going to react, and is your pet housebroken or litter trained? And then at the bottom, we ask for address information. And we asked what county they lived in for a number of reasons. In the city of Lynchburg, we do allow other residents to bring in pets from other counties if they're willing to work with us and be on our waiting list. And so we just like to track how many we bring in. And then we provide the help. So the first is rehoming. And there's a couple things I just want to talk. So this was Lynchburg Humane Society's website. So if you were to go and want to surrender your pet, and I must tell you, more people than not will look on your website first because they've probably never had to surrender a pet. Until people need us, they don't know what we do. So it's important to have as much on this website as possible. But the first thing I want to talk about is the rehoming. But you'll also see there's behavior resource, training resources, there's spay neuter resources, there's even information on feral cats if they have a problem with cats, and then all the different things they need to do about rehoming. And for Lynchburg, we would refer people to AdoptAPet. And so AdoptAPet is a wonderful program that we have hosted also on our website. People can go out and post their own pets, do their own profiles. And what's really cool about AdoptAPet and their rehoming is that any animal that is connected to your shelter that gets rehomed off of this website, you get the adoption fee. Your shelter and your center gets that adoption fee. So I do encourage you to reach out to AdoptAPet and learn more about their program. And then let's publicize it. Let's talk to people about rehoming pets themselves and adopt a pet, and give them the places they can go to find other pets in their community rather than a shelter, and how much it helps. The other thing I would say to you about owner surrenders is to make sure you thank them. Anytime someone's willing to wait, anytime someone is working with you to rehome their pet, should be a huge thank you for you and from you, because it is affecting what happens at your shelter greatly. And so we would publicize it on our Facebook page and really push rehoming to the community, so they understood that the shelter wasn't the first place to come to rehome their pet, that they could do so themselves. And then obviously you want to provide help with behavior problems and also financial problems. So when we first started our program in Lynchburg, we did not have a behaviorist or a trainer on staff. We were in one of the worst buildings you could possibly imagine. And we were bringing in, it was about 6,000 square feet, and it was a horrible place. So we looked to our community, what trainers and what behavior assistants could we get from outside sources and from our national organizations, the ASPCA and HSUS and Pets for Life program. We were providing a lot of behavior information from those types of programs and directing people to trainers. Just because you don't have the resource doesn't mean you can't find it for them in the community. And then with financial problems, it has changed over the years, but initially, as simple as giving them food or litter was a help, or connecting them with our low cost or sometimes free services for spay, neuter, and medical services, wellness services, not medical. Later on, we were able to get grants to help pay for some of the financial burdens that owners find themselves in with medical situations. Because for us, we would rather help an owner treat a parvo case in their own home and keep it there than to bring it into a shelter. So we worked through a lot of that through the many different grant programs and other resources in the community. And then last are the two last elements, is to communicate your problems. And that is something I think a lot of shelters don't do. And then to set them up on your appointment system. So let's talk about that. Helpful phrases to use. So you have all these people calling you wanting to surrender pets. And these are just basic helpful phrases that are wonderful to use to kind of connect them to the problem that you're facing. My favorite truly is the first one. I know you love your pet and want what's best. And we would say this a lot in the original days in Lynchburg when we were in our really awful building. We would say, and we were euthanizing initially for space purposes. We had a 51% save rate when I arrived, and by the end of the year, we had been able to get it up to about 75, and then the next year we were up to 80, I believe it was 87%. So this appointment system really was the crux of our success. And that was because we started to communicate what our problem was. I know you love your pet. You want what's best for Snickers. Let me tell you what's happening here at our shelter. We would like to bring your pet in when we have the space to do so. We don't want to euthanize a pet to make space for your dog. By waiting, you enable us to be able to bring Snickers in when we have a space for them. And then we can ensure you that your pet will be safe and not be euthanized for the same purpose. I can help you with your problem. I just need you to also recognize that we have problems here with space and that we want to do what's best for everybody. So don't be afraid to communicate with them. Let us help you, but also you have to help us because we have a problem and this is what the problem is. We don't want to euthanize for space purposes a healthy animal. And by waiting, you're enabling us to be able to do that and save more lives and we're striving to become a no-kill community where no animal is euthanized that's healthy or treatable. And so you are helping us by working with us through this appointment system. And it's hard to argue with that. People do, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be a few, and there's always emergency situations that truly cannot wait. but the vast majority of people responded well to those types of phrases. And the important thing to know, if you start to feel yourself slipping into a place where you want to be right, or you want to show them that they're wrong and prove something to them, then you've stepped out of line in a sense. It's not about being right, it's about doing what's right. And being right isn't always right, if that makes sense. A lot of times we have to engage people to help us. And so we need to be empathetic to the situation and do what's right for the pet. So you've got them now, they're willing to wait. So this is a snapshot of our waiting list. It's an old one back from 2014, but it really hasn't changed much. The only thing that we've added in the last couple years is we put an email line on there, because we're finding a lot of people respond to email versus phone calls anymore. So you get all their basic information. You'll see that on the right-hand side of the columns, there's end results, there's counselors, initials, initial phone calls. There's a lot of information here that we put on here because we want to know every single touch we make. We don't want to put someone on a waiting list and not follow back up with them in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, however long it is that they're on there. And then we color coded it, and this was created on Google Sheets and all of our documentations on Google, so that we could easily share it amongst a number of us that deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So I would go out and track this occasionally, especially in the early days, just to make sure that people were getting called back, that I knew that things were moving in a fashion that we were bringing animals in and we weren't making people wait too long. And so the color coding was an easy visual for me. I could quickly say yellow, they've been reached out for an appointment, there's been messages left, they're keeping their pet, or it's unresolved, and so forth. So this is kind of a snapshot of what that looks like at the Lynchburg Humane Society. And then what we started to understand is we needed to keep stats on what we were doing, because like I said, the rescue organizations were very upset with us. And so they were making a lot of claims and allegations that were just not true. So without the stats, we wouldn't have been able to prove that. So if you do a managed intake program, I do suggest that you keep stats on your progress, so that you can either make sure you're not doing something wrong and that you're not causing problems, but also to be able to address some of those naysayers out there and help educate them to the program. So these are 2018 stats. I was able to go out and pull them out pretty quickly yesterday from Lynchburg. So the columns are pretty basic. Number of profiles is number of those profiles that we filled out, like showed you in the beginning, total number of appointments that we made, total number of animals that came in through walk-ins. So this is an important number to keep, because the number one thing we used to hear is, and we still do today, you turn animals away, you don't care about owners, you're making people wait, they're dumping their animals. And we could honestly say, well, actually 650 pets came into our doors that did not have to wait for an appointment system, that we aren't making people wait that cannot wait or refuse to wait. Because honestly, an argument isn't worth an argument. It's not worth arguing with someone if they're just going to do the wrong thing. So you always look to the best interest of the pet. Then how many were unresolved, or we called them back and they never responded? How many appointments actually showed up? Because that's important too. Like, I think what a lot of people don't realize, that people make appointments, they get on the waiting list, and we start to engage them with solving some of their problems. And then they come time to actually do the appointment and they don't show up because they've had second thoughts. That really cute dog who keeps digging up the backyard and all your bushes, you hit a point where you're like, I can't handle it anymore, I'm gonna turn it into the shelter today, and you call, and then we make you wait. And then it climbs up on the sofa with you that night, and it's so sweet and loving, and it licks your hand, and then you're like, I can't turn this dog in. So it kind of, the appointment system brings people out of their emotional state and helps to kind of regulate that so they can think more clearly. So that's why sometimes people don't show up. And then going on, we also track how many animals are rehomed, how many are kept. We even started keeping how many died because we were getting people calling us with litters of kittens that were newborn, and so sometimes they do pass away. So we just wanted to make sure we kept track of it. How many people went to other organizations that we knew of? And then each month we tracked how many were on the waiting list. And I asked for that information so that I could quickly look at this and say, is our waiting list getting too long? Do we need to, do other things to move the animals through quicker? And then these are the results. So we started in 2009, and the reason that the stats end at 2014, and I know it seems like a very long time ago, is because we were in our old building until 2015. We went from around 6,000 square feet to a 25,000 square foot facility that was brand new, beautiful place. And so if I started to give you those stats, it would be completely skewed because it was not apples to apples. And I wanted to show you the progress over the first number of years before we moved into the new building. Because whenever you go from an old building to a new building, your intake increases, and it obviously did that. So our results in the first only 3 months, we had 11% rehome. Not a whole lot, but you know what? Every animal counts. It's 11% of a 2,500 intake. It mattered to us at that time, especially since a lot of those were cats. And so over the years, it's grown a little bit. It's kind of flattened itself out even in our new building to be around the 50% range. 2013, we had a dynamite person at the front desk that really made people do the work. So that's why that rate was really high. She really worked hard with people to keep the animals out of the shelter system. So one of the fears we talked about is animals are being displaced across other counties. So we tracked it. Again, we don't want to cause harm to any other organization around us. We made that very clear. And in fact, we told all of the shelters around us when we started this program, and then reiterated it every single year, that if you get any animals in from Lynchburg City proper that are owned by a Lynchburg City resident or a stray from Lynchburg City, then you are to contact us and we will come get it immediately. So we tracked the stats and we looked at all the counties around us. And if you can see this, the stray intake, 2009 was our base year. We only did this for 3 months, so it didn't really count. 2010 was our next full year of implementing the program. It did go up a little bit in Appomattox, but most of the other shelters you're seeing went down dramatically in 2010. 2011, it reduced, 2012, and you can see over the years how it went down. Also, one of the fears is that people will start abandoning their animals within the city of Lynchburg. So again, we tracked our own stats. The first full year, it went down considerably. It did jump back up in 2011. We had a really bad cat kitten season in 2011 because of a warm winter, but then it has decreased over time. And some of it is we are engaging the community with some of our community cat programs. And so I'll talk more about that. But also it's important to note, I just show this because I just find it interesting. I'm not drawing any real conclusions here, except to say that even owner surrenders went down in the other shelters. And there's probably 100 factors to this, but I do think the fact that we were becoming a safe place and we were taking in more owner surrenders from a lot of the other counties certainly helped things. Now, if you look at Lynchburg City in 2014, that owner surrender rate jumped up considerably. And this is because we did a Rachel Ray ASPCA shelter challenge in 2014, and we were looking to increase our live release rate. So we were doing adoption specials all summer long, and we never had a waiting list at all for cats or for a lot of our dogs. In fact, we were pulling animals in from other locations at that time, trying to move animals quickly. So if you are concerned about your owner surrender waiting list, you might look at increasing your outcomes in order to kind of make room for those animals coming in. And 2014 is a really good indication of how much we were doing in adoptions. So let's talk very briefly about community cats with a little bit of time left. I'm not going to talk much, but part of intake diversion is dealing with your community cat program and issues. And so first and foremost is we started to educate people on community cats. We created this flyer based on research from the Million Cat Challenge, and we started to distribute this on social media. We even gave it to a lot of the other rescues and organizations around us. And when people called us with having found a cat that's come onto their property, we always started with this: leave the cat alone, please do not feed it, give it some water, and allow it time to go home, because 66% of the lost cats will find their way back to their homes, whereas only 2 to 4% find their way back to owners and shelters. And right now, in some of the counties around us, we were seeing around 75 to 85% of the cats were not making it out. And that really the best place for the cat is to be left alone. Now, if the cat is still there in a few days, then please bring the cat to us. If the cat is in distress or is ill or is in any way in danger, you bring the cat to us immediately. We also would say, if you start feeding it, which I get, it's, you know, it's an instinct, you want to feed this cat that's roaming around and hanging out, then you now have to help us find the owner. Please put up posters in your neighborhood, go on Nextdoor, and really start canvassing the neighborhood for those owners. And then feral cats. We started a process in, I believe it was 2011, where we stopped taking in the feral wild cats in our community and instead started working with the community to fix those for free. We got a grant from PetSmart Charities, the first large grant we've ever received, and we provided free spay neuter for cats in the city of Lynchburg. And then, of course, kittens. If you have people bringing you kittens, engage them to foster those kittens. We used to call that a foster to surrender, where we get kittens a few vaccines before we actually brought them through the doors. And so we started to kind of incorporate the finders as our foster parents. So what managed intake isn't? It isn't turning away at-risk animals. It's not pushing animals to other shelters. It's not having owners dumping their animals. And in fact, we did track it in Lynchburg. We had a intake choice where it was found, or if it was found at the shelter, and we would call that abandoned at shelter. And we looked at our abandoned at shelter rates when we started this program, and then where they had each year. And we did not see an increase in animals being dumped at our shelter, which you would think would be the place that people would leave them. If they came to the door and they had to wait, or they learned about the appointment system, they would leave them there in our parking lot. And that did not happen. So what is managed intake? It's helping owners with their problems, giving them assistance, and really being a resource. It's focusing on those 98% of the responsible owners. It's not taking a life of a pet to make space for another. It is in our minds, and how we would communicate it to the public in Lynchburg is we find that it's irresponsible for us to take a life of a healthy or treatable pet just to make space for your pet coming in the door. And then ultimately, it's solving the problem through a holistic approach. It's involving the community, it's involving owners, it's helping them so that they can keep their pet, or they can rehome the pet themselves, but ultimately they are the ones who are responsible for the pets in their community. So final thoughts: we need the public's help, like I said, to solve the problem. We want to always explain the how and the why that you're doing this. Make decisions on facts, but not fear. We like to always say, let's try it and track it and see what's happening here. Let's use statistics to really drive our decision making and our policy setting. And then we would reevaluate it frequently as we looked at things. Be empathetic to owners. Every positive experience they have with your shelter will result in them as seeing you as a resource and a positive place. And that most people will understand appointment systems, and they make sense when you explain it to them in terms of saving lives. And just like we do dogs, we want to treat each person as an individual and each animal as an individual. And that's all I got, except I have a dog whining at the door to come into my office. So let me open it real fast. But let me know if you have questions.
All right. And I just want to say again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to Makena for the wonderful presentation. As a reminder, you can type in any questions you have at this moment into the questions box in that side panel there. One of the first questions we have out at the gate is from RJ, and he was wondering, how frequently do you contact people who are on the waiting list?
So we initially put them on the waiting list, and we usually call them a week later and just touch base, make sure they're okay. Or at that point, we may be scheduling them for an appointment. I've seen some of these managed intakes where they start the conversation with people and then they automatically schedule them out for like 2 to 3 weeks. And I hesitate saying that you all should do that. In fact, I think it's a bad idea because you don't know what's going to happen in 2 to 3 weeks at your shelter. So we would call people at the beginning of the week or almost daily to say, we have open space. We just had a large adoption event, and start making appointments for people right away. But if we don't have space, we would check in with them within a week, and then we would check in with them 2 weeks later. But we always made sure they had a way to communicate with us if things became a real problem for them to wait. Like a lot of times people, you know, the number one reason is landlord issues or they're moving, right? So one of the things we would do strategically is if they're moving on the 30th, we would bring their animal in on the 28th. We would say, let's go ahead and set this appointment up for the 28th. And that way we made sure, because we knew they weren't going to wait too much longer than that. And then they felt like they had an end date, but then we worked really hard with them and almost treated them as if we were their caseworker to try and get that animal rehomed before they moved.
Awesome, thank you. And Makena, this kind of tags right on with it, so we're going to jump to this one real quick. But when people were coming in for owner surrenders, did you have any success with certain programs like Rehome, like AdoptAPet's Rehome, or did you use any tools like that?
Yeah, so we did use AdoptAPet. In the early days, we literally had people send us their photos and bios, and we would just put them up on our website. With AdoptAPet, it kind of does it for you, and it's an amazing resource. And I highly suggest every organization on this call get yourselves on it and start to utilize it and publicize it on social media, because sometimes people don't have to contact you at all. They can go through that program.
All right, perfect. And this is just a real quick question someone said in general to everyone. Yes, the presentation will be emailed and it'll be available to watch. You'll receive an email tomorrow with that, and we'll also put it up on our network website, so you will be able to access this again. And the next question that we had come in is actually from Michelle, and she wanted to know, what did Lynchburg do when an animal was presented for an owner surrender, but they were actually chipped or adopted from another shelter or rescue? Did you work with the organization that originally adopted the animal?
Yes, we did. We would reach out if we knew there was another possible owner or there was another organization that originally had it. We always reached out. There's no reason not to. Unless it was an organization that you knew had a higher euthanasia rate, at which point we would tell them a lot of times that we could keep the pet and find it a good home.
Okay. All right. And we had a note that someone said they were having difficulty with the questions box. So just in case that is the problem, there is also a chat section. You can maybe try popping it into there. Otherwise, you saw Makena's email, and you can always reach us at bfnetwork@bestfriends.org. And of course, on our Facebook group, we are absolutely open to taking questions. And just, while we kind of work through this, Makena, I think you might have mentioned it earlier, but just in case anyone missed it, I was wondering, what programs did you use for creating your forms that you were using for your waiting list and your owner surrenders?
So we had the Google Suite, that's like I call it. And so we used we put all our waiting list information and all our statistical information on Google Sheets. And to this day, it's still out there. The new thing that we started doing was something called Google Forms that they can certainly go out and fill out the owner surrender information through Google Forms, and it dumps it into an Excel spreadsheet. And that was just easier for us to keep that information. But definitely check out Google. And it allows you to share it with only certain people in your organization so that those people that really need to see the information have it and can use it on a day-to-day basis. And then we also just use, for our appointment system, we just used your normal Google Calendar app. So I could go out and, you know, pull up the intake calendars, what we called it, in our calendars, and see what appointments we had that day, and what they were doing in that department. Now, I must tell you, in initial days, we still use that, but it was like one person doing everything. So don't feel like you have to have a large department to get this done. You just have to have a well-versed group of people that are all willing to pitch in and help.
Perfect. All right, and that actually kind of segues into the next question. You know, it's really like, how did you guys go about, you know, getting your staff on board and like training it? You had some great, you know, lines that you would deliver to, you know, people when they're coming in for their appointments. But, you know, but how did you go about training your staff and really getting them like engaged and on board with adopting this new system?
So in Richmond, we took a look at our front desk staff and pulled those people that already had that natural skill to be the ones to answer the phones. And then we, like I said, we did a lot of training. We did a lot of customer service training. We took bad experiences that we had or things that we did wrong and used those as teaching tools on how we could do it better. We allowed for failure because it happens, and we allowed for emotions because it happens, but then we always talked about it and looked at ways we could always improve. Now, in Lynchburg was a completely different set of circumstances. I came into a staff of 8 people that was status quo, traditional sheltering mentality, and everybody hated people. And everybody, and I say everybody, and I truly mean everybody, except for me. I was a lone person. And for me, it was trying to change their perspective. And so every time I felt like every single moment had to say, well, have you thought of this? And what about this? And if those people didn't come along, and many of them, I'd say 98% of them didn't, they found other positions outside of the organization. And I brought in people that were better fits for the job that we needed to see happen. It's hard to come from a place of fear of people to a place of trust if it's not a natural instinct for them. And so if you have people that are focused on the negative and everything that happens that is wrong, then it's going to be hard to pull them along. And so in some cases, you move them off of those jobs, or you just let them go from the organization. I hope I answered your question, and I can talk more offline with anybody, and I can give you some training exercises. And, you know, we came up with a lot of role playing, and, you know, we tried everything, but ultimately they have to have that core value of trusting.
I think that sounds like it did answer the question. So thank you for that, Makena. You know, and it looks like we don't have any new ones at this moment, but you know, I've said that before and someone's typed in one at the last second. So just as a reminder, you know, to everybody, you know, we are available after this hour for your questions. You know, we definitely want to keep that communication going. So feel free to email Makena. You know, please email us at bfnetwork@bestfriends.org or your regional specialists. We also would love it if you felt like sharing this recording. You know, please send it out to any of your colleagues. We really want to have just that collaborative spirit going. Pop into your Facebook group, ask questions there. We can, you know, we have a lot of experts out there in the community. And just, you know, thank you, Makena, you know, for giving this presentation. We have a couple of people chiming in and saying thank you. And we're really glad you were able to join us. And so, yeah, I guess, do you have any final words of wisdom for everyone, Makena? It kind of sounds like, you know, everyone's quieted down for the most part here.
Well, 2 things. If there's something that I've missed that you wish I'd covered, I would love to know, so that if I ever do these again at a conference or another type of venue, that I would like to know what I need to include, or things that were confusing. I'm always looking to improve this. Secondary is just try it. And know it's scary and you're afraid of how the community is going to respond or how they might react. But, you know, they are really honestly eager to be helpful to the situation if they understand it. And I often will say, just try it. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? So I say, give it a try. And if you run into barriers or problems, feel free to reach out to other organizations that are already doing this work, that are doing great, and or myself. I'm happy to be helpful.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, McKenna. And just to everybody else, I just wanted to throw this quick note out there. We're really glad you all were able to join us for this webinar. We do routinely host some. We have another one happening next Thursday, actually, on a fully different subject. It is about fundraising and selecting your database. But as always, all of this information is on network.bestfriends.org. Please check it out, and we are here to help you. And thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to join us.
Thank you.